Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first workshop facilitator, Gina Potito. She is the SVP of Global Delivery for LHH. Her background spans 20 years as a performance manager leader, specializing in career management, entrepreneurship, change management, coaching, and workshop transformation. Whether you've been in the workforce a while, you're re-entering, or you're changing careers, you are all in for a treat. So Gina, take it away.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today to talk about this topic. This topic is so important for you, for your career management. If you happen to be in a job search, it's imperative that you work on what we call developing your brand. And in today's session, we're just going to talk about how you do that. What are the strategies and where do you start? So why should you consider personal branding? And I like to say personal/professional, but basically look at yourself as a product. And as you go to market, you're marketing yourself, you're marketing your skill set, your value proposition to those who could buy that skill set or value proposition. And that's really, in a nutshell, what branding and personal branding is all about. So it's really important that you understand and you realize you have a unique value. And it takes time and reflection to really put this to paper so that you can then articulate it to others. And I love this quote, "Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room." And that's pretty profound because it's true. And what that means is, especially in a positive way, how do you I apologize. I'm not sure if you all are seeing my deck. So I am sharing. And I just give me a sec because I want to make sure you're all seeing what I'm sharing. Let me try this one more time. Just bear with us. Oops. Not sure why. Let me just come back here. I think I'm okay. Okay, I think you're all seeing what I wanted you to see. So let's go ahead and continue. Thanks for your patience there. So the quote that I'm sharing with you is, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And that's something that we really want to consider because people can really spread the word about our value proposition and people could detract ultimately from our value proposition. So we want to make sure that we're crafting a strong brand and that other people know about what our brand is. So what is a brand? If I were to say to you, what is a BMW known for? I think most people think of what the advertisements have told us, right? The ultimate driving machine. Or if we think of M&Ms, what comes to mind is, oh, they melt in your mouth, not in your hand. And that's because these brands have become iconic based on the advertising that we've seen, right? And advertising helps us to make something recognizable, but it also has to be relevant and trustworthy and consistent and memorable. And that's really what makes a good brand. You know, when we think of Volvo, we think of safety. When we think of Amazon, we think of convenience. You know, sometimes you can order something on Amazon and it's there same day. That's pretty convenient. So how do you take and articulate what your brand is, the product, right? What you bring to the market so that others can recognize it, see relevance in it, see it as trustworthy, understand it to be consistent and memorable. That's what we want to do when we're marketing ourselves and we're managing our career. Why is this important? Well, some brands have become consistent with the product, right? How many times, if you've ever needed a tissue, have you said to someone, hey, do you have a Kleenex? Not so relevant today, but I do recall a time when Xerox was like the copy leader globally, and people would actually say, oh, would you Xerox this for me? In essence, they were saying, would you make a photocopy of this for me? Those brands have become so identifiable. That's how people recognize the product. You know, when you think of Nike, we all think, just do it. And that's what we want brand recognition to be about, you and your value proposition. And it's not easy to get there. But once you do that, you can differentiate yourself from others from a career management perspective. You can help people understand what you do. And then therefore you can network with others and they can help spread the word about your value proposition and your brand. And it really does underscore then the value of your reputation. So I'm going to share with you 5 steps to discover and learn how to brand yourself. Step number 1 starts with know yourself. Know who you are, know what you're good at, know what you like to do, and then transfer that into relevant business statements. And we're going to talk about how you do that. So first, know yourself, then differentiate yourself. You could be a product manager or a customer service representative or a program manager or a financial analyst. There are a lot of people who share that title, but how you do what you do is different than everyone else. So you need to differentiate yourself. You then need to communicate your brand, and that starts on paper, and then it starts with you articulating what you've put to paper and then sharing it with others, because communicating your brand is so important, especially if you're trying to promote yourself internally in your organization, or let's say you're in an active job search and you want to be able to share with others what your strengths are, what you're good at. And you want to be able to share that on social media. You have to be really purposeful to build your brand. And once you've started to build your brand, it should be a constant evolution. So therefore, you always want to ask for feedback from others who can help strengthen and reinforce your brand. So how do you know yourself? Well, first, you have to identify your unique skills and your strengths. How do you make things happen? So as I mentioned, you could share titles with other people. You all could have the same title of real estate agent, but every real estate agent is different. How do you as a real estate agent make things happen? And then you want to be able to identify your values, beliefs, and passions, because that really influences how we do what we do. Each of us does have specific values, things that we're passionate about. And the more we can work within our values and our passions, the more gratification we have in the work that we do. And the single best way to identify this is to identify your accomplishments. Now, I have a very simple way I'm going to share with you to identify your accomplishments. And this is so important because you first identify your accomplishments, which, by the way, helps you identify your unique strengths and skills, because it's through exercising our skills and our strengths that we're able to achieve what we achieve personally and professionally. So identifying your accomplishments doesn't always mean in the professional workplace. It could be through work that you've done as a volunteer. It could be through what you do in other areas of life, like maybe you like sports and you compete, or because you volunteer with youth, you've accomplished things. So this is both personally and professionally. So I'm going to introduce you to the secret of identifying your accomplishments, and it's through an acronym called SOAR. And you want to identify your SOAR stories, because SOAR stories will be how you answer questions about yourself in networking conversations. SOAR stories will be how you identify your accomplishments and articulate them in an interview. And SOAR stories will help you write a really solid and excellent resume, because resumes should be based on your accomplishments, and SOAR stories help you to identify these. So what is SOAR? It's a very simple acronym, and it's SOAR. And we like to say, once you identify your SOAR stories, you really soar when it comes to career management. And if you're in a job search, identifying the absolute best next opportunity for yourself. So it starts with situation. You always want to say, what were some of the situations I found myself in? And how did I solve or resolve them, right? So what was the situation? And what's your objective? O stands for obstacle, or it could be the objective, right? Here's the situation, and here's what I want to do in that situation, what I want to accomplish. A stands for action. What did you do? What action did you take in the situation? And R stands for result. How did it benefit your organization? How did it benefit you? How did it benefit the team? How did you make a situation better, improve it, resolve it? So that's SOAR. I'm now going to give you an example of how I'd use this SOAR process to build a SOAR story. So I'm now in front of my computer, or I'm taking pen to paper, and I'm articulating my SOAR stories. This is an iterative process. So I ask you to start doing this today. It's the single best way you'll manage your career moving forward. You should always have a rolling example of up to 15 SOAR stories for your performance review, for conversations that you might be having to learn more about other opportunities outside where you work. It could be you're not working and you're trying to secure your next best career opportunity. You're going to have to interview. SOAR stories answer those interview questions. So here's the situation. At work, our packaging costs were very high. And I realized that many of the shipments we were sending out were not packaged efficiently using the lowest cost materials for safe packing. So you see my situation, then you see my obstacle or my objective. Now we're going into action. So what did I do about this problem? I created a chart on safe packaging for each item we shipped regularly, and I retrained the team. Now, by the way, I might not be a people leader in this situation, but I can take action that helps the team to improve. And what was the result? Now, it's always best if your results can be quantifiable. Sometimes they're qualitative. So they're not always quantifiable. I may have improved the team morale. It's hard to put a percent on that, but that is something that's important. But in this story, I'm saying within 2 weeks, our packaging costs were reduced by 50% because of this action that I took, which resulted in, this is one I can quantify, right? If I'm reducing packaging costs, there's a savings. So it resulted in over 380,000 packaging cost savings annually. Now that's a powerful story. Those just don't trill off our lips without thought. And this is where you could definitely get feedback from others on how to improve the stories that you're putting together to start articulating your value proposition. This is what I mean by start today, because managing your career is owned by you. And the more you can articulate your accomplishments, the things you do well, the more you can share that with others. Definitely when you're preparing for your performance review, or let's say you are up for an interview internally for a promotion, you want to be able to articulate your accomplishments. And again, I'd like you to have 15 of these SOAR stories. Now, once you start writing and crafting your SOAR stories, this is where you want to share them with your trusted advisors, your friends, people who you know will give you good feedback about how you're putting together your value proposition. I also want to show you what happens to a SOAR story when you're writing your resume. The SOAR story is the complete picture of your accomplishment. And that SOAR story is what you tell in interviews. You never know what you're going to be asked in an interview. You could be asked the question, tell me about a time you overcame a difficult situation. What was it and how did you handle it? Or you were asked, tell me about a time you helped the company do better. Either one of those questions, I could use that SOAR story I just crafted about reducing packaging costs, because it was a difficult situation and I improved the situation. It was also something I did that helped and benefited my company. It had a tangible result. But I want source stories that show the full picture of me. That's why I say I want 15. I know I'm probably going to be asked something if I'm in customer service about how I overcome negative customer situations or how I deal with a difficult customer. So I definitely want to have a story about that. Once I've crafted my stories, the A and the R become the bullet points on your resume. So your resume should always be about accomplishments, but you can't tell your full picture, that's the interview, of yourself on that 1 or 2 page piece of paper. So under each of your last, let's say, 10 years of employment chronology, you really only need to go back 10 years on your resume, because people will hire you for what you've most recently contributed in the workplace. But on my resume, under my employer and my title, I'm going to show the A and the R. So if I go back to that example I had just shared with you, that full source story about reducing packaging costs and increasing savings for the organization, I would just use the A and the R. So on my resume, the bullet would say, created a practice to reduce packaging costs that resulted in a $380,000 annual packaging cost savings. That would be the bullet. Now I could recraft that and reword it, but the bullet always starts with an action verb, a past tense verb, because your accomplishments already happened, and then the actual tangible result. Quantifiable whenever possible. Sometimes you have to guess. This individual had a better way of saying it, reduce costs, because they knew what the costs were when they began. So by reducing it 50%, they could equate that to $1 savings. Sometimes it's more qualitative. You know, I implemented a team building, overtime team building regular cadence that increased team morale. You could add by 100% if it wasn't there before, but sometimes you just leave the percent off. But your source stories start the journey of identifying what you have done well. Now, once you've identified your strengths, you do that again through articulating your source stories, you want to talk about what differentiates you from others. Again, you could have the same title as someone else. I might be a business analyst. There might be 10 business analysts in the department where I work, or I might be in a professional development group with all business analysts, because we come together as a group to sort of talk about best practices in the world of business analysis. However, I'm still unique. I'm different from some of the other people who do the work that I do. If you're in a job search or you're trying to promote yourself internally in your organization, those other business analysts are your competition. And you want to be able to show how you differ from them, where your value is an added value. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to identify your value. You have to identify your audience. And you have to say how you are unique. And that's then going to allow you to create what we call a brand statement. I'll talk about that in just a moment. It helps you to create the paragraph that goes on the top of your resume. Your summary of your resume is, in essence, your brand statement, which is how you're unique in what you do. Again, you might be a customer service representative. There are a lot of customer service representatives, but if you're in that role and it's passion and you're passionate about you, how do you do it differently than other people? What do you do better? Once you've identified how you are different, it benefits you in interviewing, in networking, and it allows you to truly create a social media plan for getting the word out there to help others recognize and understand your value. So here's an example. This woman is a project manager. Well, let's face it, there are a lot of project managers in multiple industries that you could come across and know and be a part of your social network. So if I'm a project manager, it's important that I meet deadlines, right? Because that's what project managers do. They help people stay within budget and meet deadlines. They develop and manage project requirements, and they hopefully connect with the end user, their customers' needs, so that the projects that they're managing create value for that stakeholder, their end user, their customer. But she's articulating her difference, and she's saying, I'm different because I'm really good at, I have a background in process improvement. And so as a project manager, that's a nice value add. She also could have potentially a compliance background. So because of that, she can more easily, effectively manage risk. And she's great with communication and collaboration skills so that she can liaise with both, if she's a technical project manager, the software developers who's creating the technology, as well as the end user, the customer, the business that's going to be using that technology. So she's helped to articulate what she's good at as a project manager, which should be pretty uniform with other project managers, but then how she differs, the things that she does well that allows her to say, I am unique as a project manager. Now, your brand statement is something that you'll use to market yourself. Let's say in a networking conversation, I want to be able to quickly help someone identify what I'm good at. So an example as a project manager in branding herself, making a branding statement, she would say, I'm a project manager and I keep projects moving, hitting milestones and meeting deadlines, which enables the delivery of quality products and retention of valued customers. That would be how she's branding herself, right? She's creating that one-line sentence that she could use to introduce herself. By the way, one of the most frequently asked interview questions is, tell me about yourself. So this would be a great way to answer that question. As a project manager, I keep projects moving forward, we hit milestones, I meet the deadlines, which enables the delivery of quality products and retention of valued customers. I want to be able to articulate that quickly and succinctly. Again, that always doesn't fall out of my mouth in perfect harmony to what I want the listener to hear if I'm not purposeful about that, if I haven't taken time to really craft the answer to that question. Here are some additional examples. I'm a digital marketer. I could say my personal branding statement could be, I develop powerful digital marketing strategies that help businesses find new customers. If I'm a real estate agent, I could say, I can help you find your dream home for the price that you want. Or if I'm a call center agent, I could say, I can get you the answers you need, provide you stellar service, and leave you with a smile. Any one of these are powerful statements that reinforce I'm different, I'm unique in the work that I do. So just to recap what we've talked about so far, it is imperative that you start writing your source stories because your source stories help you identify strengths and skills. So to give you an example of how you could get feedback from others, I always ask people to write out 1 or 2 source stories and then go to a friend and say, I'm working on my career management and I really want to help other people identify what I do well. So I'm going to give you an example of a situation that I was faced with in the workplace, or it might be personally. Again, I could use a story about me with my children, or I could use a story about me interacting with others whom I volunteer on a specialty group with, or I could use a story about me if I'm an athlete in the sport that I do. My stories are not always professional only and work related, but as I share my stories, again, with a trusted advocate, a friend, a colleague who I really want to help me refine my story, they will help you identify your strengths. As you tell your stories to others, say, what did you hear about me when I was telling you this story? So if I go back to that story about the person who reduced packaging costs, someone might say, you took the initiative. You know, you're one of the team. You're not the people leader of that team. I hear you taking initiative. If you were looking at, wow, we could reduce costs and save money if we were to package in a more efficient way. Someone else might say, I hear you're a team player. So this helps that individual who wrote that source story understand, how are other people viewing me as I articulate some of the things that I'm good at and what I've accomplished. Another way you can articulate to help you build your branding statement is to review old performance appraisals. You know, many times we get our performance review and we're really just looking for, we're listening for the rating. You know, what kind of rating did I get? Therefore, what kind of merit increase did I get? But really tune in to what you're hearing when you receive feedback on your performance. It might be you get it annually, monthly, every 6 months. Listen to how people give you feedback about the work that you do, because they'll highlight for you what they see as your strengths, what they see as that uniqueness that you bring to the work that you do. I once was working with a woman and she was struggling identifying her value proposition. Yet one of the things I always heard her saying is, when I'm at work, for whatever reason, I always get thrown the difficult problems. And I asked her, why do you think that is? And she said, I'm really good at taking complex information and making it easy for the masses to understand. And I said to her, do you think everyone's good at that? And she said, I guess. And I said, no, the reason you were given those complex issues was because you have a unique value. You're able to take the problem and make it easy for other people to understand it, which then makes it easy for others to solve that problem. That's not something everyone possesses. We take what we're good at for granted. And we don't necessarily give ourselves credit for what we're good at. And that's why it's so important you start with those stories, because it then helps you identify the unique skills and strengths that you brought to that situation, so that you can then identify those unique skills and strengths and create this personal branding statement. Again, a personal branding statement is just sort of one sentence about the value that you add because of the work that you do. If, by the way, you're saying, I have not yet figured out in my career what it is I want to go do, by identifying strengths, values, and accomplishments, it helps you to truly determine the trajectory of your career. Now, once you've identified all of that, it is important to consider how to engage in social media. Now, one of the sessions today is how to capitalize on LinkedIn. But what I'd like to introduce is that LinkedIn is one form of social media. And as you're going to market and managing your career and purposefully owning this articulation of your brand, you want to incorporate any and all forms of social media that you're comfortable with. Putting your toe in the water is definitely important by using LinkedIn. And I say that because the majority of recruiters who recruit to fill open positions are using LinkedIn to source talent. So if the only form of social media that you use as part of your personal branding strategy is LinkedIn, it is a really good place to start. But you also want to consider Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, any of these other forms of social media to spread the word and reinforce your value proposition. They all should be aligned. The thing that I would encourage you to do to get started in what I'd call brand management is Google yourself. Do a Google search, because you want to see how you show up to others. And by the way, do your Google search on a machine you don't use frequently. You want to Google yourself on someone else's computer. And I say that because Google has a way of sort of refining the data that it brings back based on things that you have done previously. So if you Google yourself on someone else's machine, you're going to see sort of what the world at large sees about you. That's important for a number of reasons. The first one is get a bead, sort of a baseline on how you're showing up in the online world. There could be some great stuff. Let's say you did a presentation that was for a group that you're a member of, and it was advertised online. So that could sort of reinforce, if you're saying I have excellent presentation skills, that you do because you were invited to do a presentation for this group. But you also want to Google yourself to see if there's any negatives that are out there. Let's face it, other people may have tagged you in posts that you don't necessarily want to be publicly out there. So once I've Googled myself, I'm able to sort of have an understanding of how I'm showing up across all of the different forms of social media on the internet. And if there's anything that's controversial or negative to your purposeful brand, ask others to either take it down, or with the other more social forms of social media, such as Facebook and Twitter, just make sure you're cultivating what you want others to see if your privacy is not locked down. And if you don't want other forms of social media to be used, if people are Google searching you, especially for employment reasons, then I would highly recommend you learn about how to manage the security and privacy on those sites and make yours as private as possible. Again, LinkedIn is the premier form of social media for professionals. It's been around for a number of years, and LinkedIn really helps us to curate our brand when it comes to us professionally. Again, you can take a course. We will have one later today that Leah will lead about how to really rock your LinkedIn profile and make sure it's working on your behalf. But one of the things that you can do is customize your headline on LinkedIn. And this is, by the way, when someone's searching on LinkedIn, specifically recruiters, they're always going to see your headline and the first couple sentences of your summary on your LinkedIn profile. So if that's the case, I want to capitalize on that headline. So once you've written your branding statement, you definitely want to incorporate some of that into your headline on your LinkedIn profile so that when you show up in searches, you're showing up with your value proposition on LinkedIn. So just a recap of some of what we've talked about, give and ask on LinkedIn for recommendations. The endorsements that you might receive on LinkedIn can be powerful in quantity. Like, let's say I consider myself a career coach. Well, I would want to have a lot of endorsements on that skill on LinkedIn, right? Because there it's quantity, but recommendations are quality. Ask others to recommend you on LinkedIn, others that have done work with you. And you also will get more powerful connections by following industry groups and joining those groups, because that exponentially expands your network. And I want to be networking with like-minded people. If I'm in a job search, I want to be networking with people who work for companies I work for, that I want to work for, or who work in industries that I want to work in. And so one of the best ways to expand your network on LinkedIn is to join groups and be articulate in those groups, you know, be commenting and liking what other people do or sharing posts. But to start with your social media campaign, definitely, I'd like you to start by Googling yourself and then re-examining all of your social media accounts and really being purposeful about removing anything viewed as controversial. You know, anything controversial could be politics, even in some cases, sports that you follow. If you follow it, you know, you're a fan of a specific team and you're in an interview process and your hiring manager is not a fan of that team. I mean, that could be considered controversial. So I want to remove anything that could jeopardize me of, you know, getting to where I want to be in my career. Request friends and family members take down anything that might be considered questionable as far as your online presence, because once you've articulated your brand and you're going to market, right? Again, if you are looking for your next career opportunity, you're a product. And I'm going to marketing myself as a product. That's my brand. I want to make sure my brand is very showing up consistently across any form of social media, and at least reinforcing what I want my brand to be. And then we talked about the final step of building your personal brand, and that's ask for feedback. You don't have to go this alone. Others can help you articulate this, especially your trusted friends and family members, folks that you've worked with, that you've transcended colleague status. You really see them as advocates for you. Do they know how you have written your brand? You want to share that with them, and then you want to ask feedback of them. Every one of your source stories, ask people to give you feedback on it. Now, I share that because I actually, as a career coach, was working with a woman who was a senior leader in human resources. And she was up for a chief human resource officer position. She was interviewing for this role, and I was her career coach. And so she and I were doing a mock interview. And I said to her, let's rehearse using your source stories. I'm not going to tell you the questions I'm going to ask you, but I want you to come to this mock rehearsal interview with 15 source story examples, so that not only will I be asking you questions, but as I listen to your answers, I'll be giving you feedback on your answers. So we've gone through a few of, I'd asked her, tell me about yourself. Tell me about a time you had a difficulty with a senior leader that you reported to. What was the situation? How did you handle it? She had great source stories to answer these questions. And then I asked her, tell me your strength. And she had a great answer. And by the way, I probed on that one. I said, give me another one. And so I would ask you, if you are preparing for an interview, to not just prepare one answer for tell me a strength. I actually want you to have 3 or 4, because if the interview says, tell me another one, you don't want to be coming up empty. You only had one strength, right? So you want to have a strength and why you say it's a strength of yours, and then a second and a third and a fourth. And then I flipped and I said, tell me a weakness. And by the way, you might want to prepare 2 answers to that question, because I know of interviewers who actually probe and say, tell me another weakness. And again, I don't want to be coming up empty. Or if we're not prepared in an interview, we sometimes go real honest, which is not always the best answer. So I want to be prepared, not rehearsed, but prepared to answer the questions the interviewer might ask me. So I asked her tell me your weakness. And she said, oh, Gina. And again, we were rehearsing. She said, I have the perfect answer for this one. And I said, great, I'd love to hear it. And she said, my answer to that is, I, as an HR professional, have always found it is important for people to have work-life balance. There needs to be work-life balance for people to bring their whole selves to work and have well-being. However, I never discovered that the value of work-life balance, it truly, I believe, was a weakness of mine until I had my son. And once I gave birth to my son, it truly taught me the value of balancing work and personal life. And I looked at her and I said, I am not going to recommend you use that story. And she asked me, why do you say that? Now, again, this is why I say, once you've built your brand, ask others for feedback. And I said to her, Holly, because what I'm hearing is, you used to struggle with work-life balance. That was the weakness. But now that you've mastered it, it's not important for you to focus on your career. I said, I'm sorry, that's what I'm hearing in that story. And so we tried to refine it and change it. And ultimately, I said to her, I think you need a different example for tell me a weakness. Now, the answer should always be problem resolved. If I have a weakness, it should be something that I've fixed when I answer that question. And that was what she was struggling with, because by fixing it, it sounded to me like she was not going to be as dedicated in her role. Do I want our Chief Human Resource Officer to be more focused on her balanced life or focused on what she's going to do for the organization? That's what feedback can do for us in the process of managing our career. Help others help you. Don't just write your stories and assume they're good. You want to get feedback. Ultimately, that answer to the question, what's a weakness, should be something you've solved for. So a good answer might be, I struggled with time management early in my career. I took feedback from my manager about that, and she and I had a conversation about what I could do. She actually recommended I attend a time management course. It was invaluable. And I have to say today, I am very good about time management and organizational skills. That's a good answer to a weakness question. But again, one of the best ways for you to refine and manage your career effectively is to get feedback from others. So get feedback from others on your brand, get feedback from others on your store stories, get feedback from others on what you do well. And it helps you then to articulate how you're going to get your brand out. Because I want people easily to recognize what I do and what I'm good at. That should be something they should not have to struggle to understand. It's my job to help them to understand that. And of course, begin with trusted people. People you know will give you real, honest feedback. Those are your family members, your close friends. And you want people who will fully understand what you do, because then they help you network to get to people that you need to know. If I'm in an active job search, the people I know may not necessarily be able to hire me, but they know people who potentially can hire me. And so that's why I want my network to really understand my value and my unique strengths and my skills. So let's put it all together. Sometimes the best place to start in something that might seem monumental, managing your career or finding your next best career opportunity might seem like that monumental task, right? Well, I always like to say, how did the ant eat the elephant? One bite at a time. And so we like to call these micro actions. Get started with one small action, because once you've accomplished that, you then can go to the next action and the next action and the next action. And that's how you move yourself forward in something as monumental, that elephant of managing my career and really building my personal brand. One action could be highlight your unique skills and strengths. Another is definitely craft your source story. Start with one story, then the next couple of weeks add another, the next couple of weeks add another. Highlight your accomplishments. If you want to really get more involved in social media, like, follow, and share posts on LinkedIn. Add hashtags. Like if you are a financial analyst, hashtag financial analysis as you're following or liking or adding posts on social media. Practice remote interviews. Practice networking. Rehearse. If you want to have a great networking conversation, sometimes rehearsal and practice makes us so much better in the live moment. Create or improve your social media profile. Put that as your action to get started. Or if the only thing you do is ask for feedback on your brand statement or your source stories or your resume, by all means do that, because sometimes we create in a silo and others can really help us to improve and to get better at creating our personal brand.